The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke.
Glory to you, Lord.
Jesus said to his disciples, "The Son of Man must suffer greatly and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed on the third day, and be raised." Then he said to all, "If anyone wishes to come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. For whoever wishes to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will save it. What profit is there for one to gain the whole world, yet lose or forfeit himself?" The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
You and I know that authors have their point of view. For example, you know that if a book is by Stephen King, you probably won't sleep that night because it's going to be scary. Or you may not sleep for the rest of your life. Writes that scary stuff. And other authors we know that have a certain slant on things. Oftentimes authors that have been either spies or attorneys or this or that wind up coloring their books with that point of view. And the first book that we heard from today, the book of Deuteronomy, has a point of view in it that the Jewish people were very familiar with. And the book of Deuteronomy means second law. It was like reiterating the law of Exodus, the 10 Commandments and so on. And its point of view was that we are in a covenant with God and we need to live and follow that covenant. And also, when prophets come along, we need to listen to the prophets. And so this was written long after the Exodus, but it kind of captured what people needed to do to remain faithful, to be the people of Israel and God's chosen people. So that as they go on through these various stories that later come in the Bible, stories of Joshua and Judges and 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Samuel. They all have that slant. Be faithful to the covenant. If you're not faithful, trouble's going to happen. And as prophets arise, then it's important to listen to the prophets. And of course, we know that many times people weren't very faithful. They really didn't live up to that. And they also were not respectful of prophets. Many of the prophets were martyrs and were rejected. And as I'm thinking about our life together in Lent here, and also it was that we are a people of God. It's not just a bunch of individuals, but like we're supposed to be a people. And during the season of Lent, it's important that we sense ourselves as people, and not necessarily just in the Catholic Church, but other Christian churches really value Lent, value that call to conversion that there is. And so I was reflecting a little on that, and as Sister Joanne was reading, Moses, and the book of Deuteronomy is like a series of sermons that Moses gives to his people. And the first thing was, "Today I have set before you life and prosperity, or death and doom." That we're always confronted with today, and we always have choices. And we can always follow the inspiration of the Spirit, or we can follow kind of our false self and our addictions and our petty resentments and stuff that make us react to people in certain ways. I was hearing about an opera singer who I'm a little familiar with. Her name shall remain anonymous, but she was noted for being a really mean-spirited person. And she would sing these wonderful spirituals and absolutely beautiful music, and then she would treat people just terribly. And you'd sort of say, wow, how can a person have this beautiful music coming out, but then be such an unpleasant, nasty person? And we all have our moments. Perhaps maybe there's a time in your life where you regret a moment of reacting to someone in not a good way. I'm admiring Francis because I see him as a prophet, a very prophetic figure in the midst of an institution, which the Catholic Church is. And he's really stressing people or challenging us because he keeps looking at each institution within the institution and saying, well, we've got to be inspired by Jesus. So he told the College of Cardinals, for example, we are supposed to smell like our sheep. We're not supposed to be this elite prince of the church kind of mentality, which most of us growing up kind of thought, if you're a cardinal, that's kind of like a prince in the church. And he's sort of saying, no, we shouldn't be having princes, that you're called to be a servant. And he's looked at something like the Vatican Bank, and he's saying, if we're going to have any money institution connected with the Catholic Church, it has to be rooted in the Holy Spirit and be a source of love and service rather than, as we hear, Monsignors laundering money for drug lords and, I mean, really ugly stuff that you'd say, how did that ever happen? How did that ever become a part of the Catholic Church? But he's just willing to say, no, that we're not going to do that. Business as usual is not the way it is. So he's being a prophet within the institution, and he's getting unpopular with some people who don't like that. And then we take an institution here at the corner of Fifth Avenue and Saginaw Street, and you know, we are, Catholic Charities is an institution that's part of the Diocese of Lansing, which is part of the Catholic Church in the United States, part of the Catholic Church in the world, and we're always trying to purify ourselves so that what we do, first of all, represents Jesus Christ, that's what we're about, that every today that we have set before us life and death. We have set before us love and service versus being institutional and being cold and being sterile and, you know, always looking at the bottom line financially rather than what are the needs of my client. And it's a difficult journey to do, to balance that and to struggle with that. I'm sure that Deacon Mike, as he's been looking at ministering here at St. Michael's Parish, and the income isn't what it was back in the good old days, quote unquote. It's a very difficult ministry to do with what resources that we have. And that's part of what the challenge is for each one of you and for the board and for donors and for Vicki and just everybody. The challenge is, how do we keep this institution, first of all, the face of Christ, and then also we can survive financially and all those institutional things that we need to do. It's a very, very difficult thing. Now, I know that sometimes I can see in myself, if somebody comes in, you know, like I may have something I'm ready to do. I'm ready to go say Mass, or I've got an appointment coming up, or I have to go to the bathroom or whatever, and in comes, you know, so-and-so with some need. And I either listen to them or don't listen to them, or they catch the brunt of a little bit of impatience and maybe not the loving servant that they need to have sometimes. And that's the challenge for each one of us, to lay aside. That's part of our cross is, you know, we've made a commitment to serve in this institution that's going to represent charity, Catholic Charities. And the challenge for us then is, how can we always be charitable? And I mean, sometimes charitable is to say, you've got to stop drinking and that's where your money's going, or you've got to do this. I mean, sometimes charity can be a challenging thing and not just always going along and being codependent. But what's the inspiration of it? Where does our spirit come from? That's the challenge. And so we're kind of like the Jewish people who are saying, we need to be faithful to the covenant. We need to listen to our prophets. We need to function as the people of Israel. And as Catholic Charities faces the season of Lent, it's going to say, how can we be really Catholic, really charitable, really be a place where people know they will be welcomed with love and a smile as they unfold their particular needs? And how do we function together as a team in a loving and Christian way? I've been in some situations or been on boards of Catholic things where people, and their inability to get along was really kind of breathtakingly terrible. And you'd sort of say, wow, this isn't going to represent us well. How can we get together? How can we move along as a people? And so I just urge you, as you make individual choices for whatever you're going to do for Lent, as you perhaps exercise moderation in some area of your life by giving up things or whatever it might be, and where you exert yourself a little more deeply to some aspect of your life, whether it's personal prayer or service or volunteering or fasting or those kinds of things, that you always, every day when you come in here, say, okay, I'm going to go be a part of Catholic Charities today. How charitable am I going to be? How open am I to the team members that maybe kind of grate on my personality a little bit? That's the challenge that we have. So I will be praying for you. I only see you once a month on average, but you're on my mind a lot. And I know that financially there's the big drive, and the needs are so much greater than the resources that we have. That can get really difficult, really stressful. And to always be thinking, the Jesuits have a phrase, magis, which is Latin for more. They're always asking, what more? What's the magis in this situation? What more can I do for Christ? And so I just pray that spirit be with each one of you as individuals, but then all of you as an institution, as you try to more and more and more represent the Catholic Church, the face of Jesus Christ, and God's love and charity in the midst of a city right now that's very wounded and struggling.